Hey, can't we all just get along? In the Whitefish Range of Montana, loggers, bikers, hikers, and critters are making peace.
Right now, the animals have space, we got space, and we're all friends.
As a farm worker, you didn't have a voice. You couldn't talk. You couldn't speak your piece. You couldn't speak your mind. Because if you make too much noise, you're out of a job.
Fighting for farm workers after decades of pesticide poisoning. And it's back to the future on these Montana farms. Ancient organic practices are paying off for the palate and the environment. We'll share the buzz on complex systems. These bees can teach humans a thing or two about creative communication.
A bee colony, just like any society, is constantly faced with challenges and new situations.
Are you as pumped as we are? Let's get started now on This American Land. Funding for This American Land is provided by the Turner Foundation.
Hi, and welcome to This American Land. I'm Ed Arnett, and today we've got some great stories for you about the conservation of America's natural resources, our landscapes, our waters and wildlife, and the people that are dedicated to conserving those resources in areas where they work and live. Today we start off in Montana near the Canadian border, below Glacier National Park, where the mountains of the Whitefish Range provide amazing wildlife habitat, recreation, and timber resources that local residents are determined to protect.
This is the Whitefish Range. For 50 to 60 miles, it rolls on down to the town of Whitefish. We have forests that are dense, intermixed with spruce and larch, and provide great wildlife habitat.
The Whitefish Range Partnership is a group of local citizens with diverse interests who have come together to craft recommendations around how to manage the Whitefish Range.
What we're looking at here is part of what we agreed upon in the Whitefish Range Partnership. Down here, part of the land would be designated for logging, and then another part would be recommended for wilderness.
We've developed a set of recommendations that we've presented to the Forest Service for consideration about how to manage the Whitefish Range, whether it's going to be suitable for timber harvest, wilderness designation, whether it's going to be motorized, recreation. Values need to be protected.
Some of the people who started out at the beginning of our process hardly are even on speaking terms with each other. But they recognize that if you go into this kind of a process recognizing that everyone's entitled to their say and no one's entitled to their way, and if they can accept that from the beginning, it'll work. Everybody here has a legitimate stake in the management of the Whitefish Range. The wilderness advocates supported the increased timber harvest, and the timber advocates supported the increased wilderness area. And I don't think very many people around here would have thought that was possible when we started.
This stand is a good example of the type of forestry we're trying to promote. We practice what we call best tree management, where we focus on what we're leaving behind, not what we're taking.
My name's John Frederick. I've lived in Polbridge, Montana for 34 years. As far as wildlife goes, it's the grizzly bears are the big attraction here. They value bears up here, which isn't everywhere, but they really do up here. What I worry about especially is development. More houses, more people, more pets, more people that don't know how to deal with bears, and people just unfamiliar with the area, they don't have a feeling for it. We have proposed wilderness, but they're not federally designated as yet. The Whitefish Range needs the protection of wilderness.
The grizzly bears here can spend time in southeast British Columbia, then come down into the Whitefish Range, and then cross into Glacier National Park and go up into Waterton Park in southwest Alberta. And you're still talking about one individual bear. Part of the motivation behind the Whitefish Range Partnership and the work that's being done there is that In British Columbia, north of the boundary, the provincial government there gave up their oil and gas and mining rights in their portion of the range and the watershed. There's actions that are taking place on both sides of the border that are actually raising the bar for the landscape, increasing the ecological integrity of the landscape to ensure that it is this way into the future.
I think it gave me a real clear voice to speak in behalf of the last of the roadless area on the northern third of the Whitefish Range. I'm a real wilderness person, but I also have been on a working end of a chainsaw and worked in the woods and operated a small sawmill up there. So I have been on both sides of the fence. I expected from the motorized people some resistance, but you know, at the end of the collaborative when we all voted, they didn't totally oppose wilderness either. So everybody walked away from the table with more than what they came with, and I thought that was really positive. There is room for consensus. You know, there's room for a viable timber industry. We don't have to keep litigating everything. You know, we need to sit down at the table and we need to hash out and work out workable solutions, and it needs to be done on a local level.
Forests are intended to be managed for multiple use benefits, and one of those benefits is providing fiber for the needs of society. Ultimately, the plan we came up with, I think, was a very good plan. It was a balanced plan. It looked at all the competing uses up there and found a place in the landscape for just about everybody.
I think the Forest Service is looking for new ways that they can engage the public in a more collaborative and inclusive way. And I think the partnership is a good example of one way that a community can do that.
I do think that we all learned that conflict doesn't get you anywhere, but actually trying to listen and understand other people's issues and then come up with solutions is a positive way to work.
I hope that it's enduring. I hope it helps to mitigate the timber wars in this part of the world and maybe lead to more and better agreements in other national forest lands.
Right now, the animals have space, we got space, and we're all friends.
We'll stay in Montana for a very different story about organic farming, a fast-growing sector in agriculture, offering new opportunities to small-scale farmers who can get valuable advice and support from the federal government, as we see in this report.
My name is Andrew Long. I run a small on-farm oil crushing facility called the Oil Barn. At least in part to me, organics means kind of a return to what we know does work and what we know is safe. And I think it gives a lot of people comfort knowing that something's raised without modern chemicals or genetically modified crops.
Some of the organics procedures go back to when early agriculture was practiced before the chemicals and pesticides. But in a way, some of that information may have been lost over the years, so the organic producer is relearning some of that information.
I work with a local farmer. His name is Casey Bailey, and he grows safflower for us and a number of other crops there on his farm. It's been good to have him because he's so close by, and he gives me a lot of the feedback that helps me to understand the farmer's perspective of growing a crop.
Our soils very much benefit from another crop in the rotation, and the safflower plants can do that for us as well as be a good thing for the tables of people. So I'll leave that up to you, Andrew, that you can handle the people and their plates, and I'll handle the soil.
So these are our oil presses, and they're crushing safflower right now. So the seeds fall down from this tank into the presses here, and there's a screw inside it that continually turns and crushes it up against the head. The dry meal comes out of the front of the press, and the oil drips down below. These pellets are actually used as a protein supplement for cattle. We have about 4,000 acres that we farm, and we rotate between a number of different crops from grains like wheat and kamut, and barley, safflower, of course. And we rotate between all that to kind of give our production diversity and to provide nutrients to the soil and help be a little more resistant to pests and weeds.
A lot of acres, 4,000, so we need big machines.
Seth Goodman is our farm manager here, and he showed us a tractor that had been converted to run off of waste vegetable oil. And that is kind of the second arm of what we're doing here with our safflower oil processing facility.
Essentially what we do is we grow and produce fresh cooking oil. We deliver it to restaurants and they use it, but we also receive that waste oil back and we're able to sell that again to the farmers who use it as fuel. We are essentially selling the same product twice, but delivering two different values to two different people. And it kind of closes the entire circle of the life of the oilseed.
For a guy like me that's brand new to agriculture, it's great to know that there's organizations like the NRCS available that put on workshops and have a wealth of information to help someone out like me that doesn't know very much. They're a great resource for someone who's starting out or has questions, somebody that's even been in farming and agriculture for a long time.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Andrew.
Looks like you're having fun. And you have help today.
I seem to always have help. Our farm is a family operation, but we maybe went about it in a non-traditional way. What we see is the benefit of growing up on a small family farm with animals and good food and our family all around us.
Oh, it's okay. He's kind of freaked out. Yeah. Are you coming to see the bear? So we had a bear come, and here this used to be standing, and she ate quite a bit of the bird seed.
People farm for all sorts of different reasons, but Julie and I love to eat. And if you really value health and your body, there's nothing more important than food. And there really isn't anything better than food that's grown without pesticides and chemicals.
Initially, we learned about programs through the NRCS from another grower who had worked with Andrew setting up a high tunnel. So I contacted Andrew, and then he was able to help me through a process of so many different programs that I didn't realize were available. So not only the high tunnel, but lots of nutrient management programs with cover cropping and soil sampling, and we planted lots of trees and shrubs for beneficial insects and wildlife. So we set out with one project in mind, and then we were able to do so many more through that process, which was so helpful for us. We set up a big irrigation system that has been amazing.
Underneath this fabric here, they've got their drip irrigation system running, and so that's providing water directly to these plants and not watering all the weeds outside of that. So they've got the advantage of keeping weeds down with the fabric. The water is really concentrated right on the plant, and these tomato plants should do great this year. So Foothills will remove this at the end of the year as part of their organic certification to allow the soil to naturally regenerate and not have a synthetic material over it. And then they'll just roll it back out the next year. And this will last numerous years. I mean, it's starting to get a little bit worn, but it's still keeping the weeds at bay. They can reuse the same holes. These are all transplanted tomatoes, so they're able just to come back and put the tomatoes right back in. You know, one of the nice things about these tunnels and kind of the microclimate they create is that you can do some really interesting things with cover crops in the growing season. I think, too, you know, since you have season extension now, so you can grow earlier and later in the season, you're not just having a two-crop sequence where you're going tomatoes, not tomatoes. You've actually got almost a 3 or 4 rotation because you've got a spring crop. If you do a cover crop in here and then a fall crop, that's 3 different crops before you go back to tomatoes if you put tomatoes in here next year.
Yep.
Hey, my girl.
I think not only do I appreciate organic farming for the health of the consumer who's eating our food, but also the health of the land and water and people who live in rural areas and on farms.
People have been able to farm organically for, you know, years and years and years and years. we have an appreciation for the yesteryear and feel like there's no reason why we can't continue the tradition.
Of course, one of the problems with large-scale agriculture that is not organic is the risk of pollution and environmental damage caused by fertilizers and pesticides. And in this report from Florida, produced with Earth Justice, we're reminded that pesticides can also cause direct harm to people working in agriculture.
I started working in the fields at the age of 6. And every day, the crop dusters would come over and they would spray you. Sometimes you do this, your clothes soaking wet.
We be in the field and have a plane spraying, and they spray that stuff right on top of us. The seals down there working, it's right on top of us.
Uno a veces llegaba a sentir hasta la brisita del pesticida que estaban rociando allá para acá. Para uno estaba bien porque o sea, estás trabajando, tu cuerpo está caliente. Sentir la brisa se sentía bien. No te dicen los riesgos de todo eso.
They're being exposed every day to a witch's brew of toxins. These chemicals were invented during the Second World War as a nerve gas by the Nazis to use against people. And it was only after the war it was realized that these chemicals that would kill people can also kill insects. And there's a long, long list of health problems that result.
The Environmental Protection Agency has estimated that 20,000 farm workers every year get pesticide poisoning. That doesn't include all the farm workers who will then have health problems 5, 10, 20 years down the line.
Every day you get sprayed with pesticide, it gotta make you sick in the long run. As a farm worker, you didn't have a voice. You couldn't talk. You couldn't speak your piece. You couldn't speak your mind. Because if you make too much noise, you're out of a job. You had to accept the treatment or you couldn't take care of your family.
But if you don't call it,
in cases of human farm worker pesticide poisoning, causation is almost impossible to prove. How do you do that? You can't give methyl bromide to half a group of experimental human subjects and keep it away from the other half. You can't conduct experiments like that. But you can ask questions like why a particular group of people who you know have been exposed to pesticides are showing symptoms, endocrine problems, cancers, reproductive problems. All of these have been linked in animal studies to various pesticides.
While the impact of pesticides on human beings is difficult to prove, their impact on the environment is obvious.
In the 40s and 50s, Lake Apopka was a premier bass fishing lake. But in the 1940s, they began growing crops here. And of course, in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, they used some of the worst pesticides. So because of farm runoff, Lake Apopka became very polluted, and it just kept getting worse. The pollution on the lake became its most prominent feature.
By 1998, the lake became one of the most toxic sites in the United States, on the verge of ecological collapse. Faced with little choice, the government purchased the land from the farmers for over $100 million in order to begin the massive cleanup process.
I remember the day my sister came home. She said, well, they just gave us our check and told us not to come back no more. I was teasing. I said, you know how they do. I say, that mean the season over. They'll call y'all back next year. She said, no. She said, they no more work. Found out they actually did close the farm.
Mm-hmm. Farm workers were the big losers on Lake Apopka.
They spent several $1 million looking into the alligators' reproductive problems. They spent millions of dollars on wondering how birds died. not a cent for the workers who were getting cancer, who were having birth defects, who were developing all sorts of diseases related to pesticide exposure. And the final insult was $500,000 was put in the state budget for a little clinic to help these 2,500 people. And Governor Scott vetoed it. So they're back to square one. They're sick, they're getting elderly, and every year that goes by, the problem, unfortunately, gets smaller just by attrition.
It just make you lose hope. So I'm at the point now in my life where I don't believe what any of them say. You can keep getting disappointed. You just keep getting disappointed. I'm gonna pack my bags. I'm gonna be by the river. Early, early in the morning. Oh, yeah. Oh, oh, oh.
We had hoped to get some justice for the farm workers. But right now, I think what the community would like to see is to have their legacy remembered, to validate their experience, validate their place in history.
They don't call it a beehive of activity for nothing. With thousands of insects and no one leader, it's fascinating to watch just how smoothly things roll in these complex communities. Miles O'Brien reports, humans can learn a lot by paying attention to the buzz.
A beehive is a little like a stock market. Both involve huge numbers of transactions.
It's the collective activities of many individuals that together give rise to the behavior of the market.
And like at the stock exchange, no one individual is in charge.
The queen is very well known, but she doesn't run the show. She has a job, which is to lay eggs. So how's the tagging going?
With support from the National Science Foundation, entomologist Gene Robinson and mechanical engineer Harry Dankovich at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Come on in.
And psychologist Whitney Tabor at the University of Connecticut are studying how coordination emerges in these leaderless complex systems.
To be able to see the connection between individual behavior and overall behavior.
A beehive is a useful model system to study how complex human systems work.
A bee colony, just like any society, is constantly faced with challenges and new situations.
Using high-resolution cameras, Robinson's team studies how bees interact deep inside the hive.
You see tens of thousands of individuals bumping into each other,
touching their antenna to another, possibly exchanging food or some other kind of interaction.
Older bees forage for food. In the hive, they emit chemical signals that prevent the younger bees from maturing. But when there are fewer older bees, the absence of the chemical signals causes the younger bees to mature faster to pick up the slack. Just one of many types of asynchronous communication that go on in a beehive.
Asynchronous communication goes on in all sorts of different contexts, in computers, in the brain. The brain has billions of neurons that are communicating in ways that we have yet to really figure out.
A key challenge for both bees and humans is deciding who should do what when no one is in charge.
This is a group coordination game that you're going to be playing with other people in the room.
Since humans use language to communicate, Tabor's group is studying how people create communication systems for performing coordinated tasks.
And we don't let them actually talk to each other. So we're interested in the way a kind of language-like system develops in this context of having to do a joint task with other people.
Dankovich's team maps both bee and human interactions.
We want to see how complex systems adapt to challenges, to circumstances that enable them to be robust, to not fail.
Dankovich says first they must determine the patterns of coordination in these complex systems. The next challenge will be figuring out how to keep systems like these humming. For Science Nation, I'm Miles O'Brien.
Now here's a quick look at a story from our next show.
You could be sitting outside and all of a sudden here comes this whiff of rotten egg, sewer, hydrogen sulfide. I, have to come in the house because of my breathing.
More than 1,400 coal ash pits are scattered across the United States. We'll show you how the largest site in West Virginia has impacted the community.
At what point is my garden no longer safe to eat? At what point is my water no longer safe to drink?
I have to stand up. I'm not going to take this sitting down. And again, it's not just for me. It's for my people I've known all my life. It's for the generations to come.
Happy luxury. Piru Creek is the finest piece of nature in this part of Southern California. It's virtually untouched. Almost every turn in the river holds fish.
Protecting California's public lands. Meet the ranchers and residents weaving together and protecting this wilderness.
Thanks for watching. And remember, you can always catch us at thisamericanland.org. We'd like to hear your ideas and comments on stories that we should cover. We'll see you next time.
For more information about this program, visit thisamericanland.org. Funding for This American Land is provided by the Turner Foundation.